The most dangerous people never need threats to take control. They make silence feel like a verdict, and your own fear does the enforcement. That is why, in anime, the silent villain is not quiet because he lacks power. He is quiet because power has already entered the room and begun rearranging everyone's posture. The first thing he attacks is not the body, but the social weather. A loud villain announces himself like a storm. A silent one arrives like gravity. He doesn't shout to dominate the atmosphere. He removes the possibility of resistance by making everyone else feel childish for even trying. This is why his entrances are so devastating. The camera lingers. The background score drops into a low pulse. Other characters freeze, and the room becomes a courtroom with no defense attorney. The villain says almost nothing, but every second of silence multiplies his authority. Human beings are desperate creatures. We scan faces for certainty, tone for rank, and movement for threat. When a man walks in and does not perform emotion, the brain invents force where none may be visible. The silence itself becomes evidence. An anime understands something brutal. People do not obey the strongest person. They obey the person who can make them feel observed. The silent villain's greatest weapon is not rage. It is stillness sharpened into attention. He watches without blinking, and that watchfulness makes everyone around him self-audit their words, their breathing, their very reasons for standing there. In that instant, the room stops being social and becomes biological. You are no longer talking to a character. You are standing inside a predator's field of perception. Think about your own life for a moment. The people who unnerve you most are rarely the loudest. It is the ones who pause too long before answering, who tilt their head as if they are measuring your value, who let you fill every silence with your own mistakes. That is the same mechanism silent anime villains exploit with terrifying precision. They understand that most people are not broken by force. They are broken by anticipation. A threat only works if it is explicit. But a silent villain operates in ambiguity. And ambiguity is where the mind bleeds. When he says nothing, everyone else starts narrating his intentions. Is he angry? Is he amused? Did he notice the weakness in my voice? That uncertainty creates a mental vacuum, and humans rush to fill vacuums with worst-case scenarios. The room begins to obey before the villain ever lifts a finger. This is why the best silent villains in anime often seem almost polite. They do not need theatrics because politeness can be more terrifying than cruelty when it is used without warmth. A calm gaze, a measured walk, a relaxed posture. These details signal a level of self-containment that other people interpret as invincibility. We instinctively trust emotional volatility less than emotional control. The problem is that emotional control, in the hands of a predator, becomes a forge. He is not suppressing violence. He is proving he can choose when to unleash it. And the deeper horror is this: the room helps him. Everyone becomes an accomplice to their own submission, because fear is contagious and embarrassment is faster than courage. Nobody wants to be the first to overreact, the first to look weak, the first to challenge a man who hasn't even spoken yet. So the silence spreads, and the villain stands at the center of a social collapse that looks voluntary. The real genius of the silent villain is that he turns attention into a weapon. Loud antagonists seek applause, outrage, spectacle. Silent antagonists seek calibration. They want to know exactly how much pressure a person can handle before the mask cracks. A slight glance, a half smile, a pause after a name is spoken. These microscopic gestures are not decoration, they are probes. He is testing the architecture of the room. In animation, the artistry here is relentless. The frame narrows. The villain's face barely moves. Yet the tension grows because the audience understands an ancient rule of power. The less someone reveals, the more everyone else reveals themselves. Silence forces projection. It makes the other characters confess through their body language. One straightens too fast, another laughs too loudly, a third looks away. The villain does not need to threaten them because he has already made them participate in their own exposure. This is the psychological inversion that makes these scenes unforgettable. In normal conversation, speech protects people by giving them cover. In the presence of a silent predator, speech becomes a liability. Every word risks becoming a footprint. Every apology confirms guilt. Every joke sounds desperate. the room starts policing itself, which means the villain has successfully outsourced discipline to the victims. And this is where the most chilling revelation begins. Because the silent villain is often not the strongest fighter in the story. He is the best reader. He reads hesitation like a blood trail. He reads loyalty as something conditional. He reads confidence as something performative. In other words, he does not dominate by being monstrous. He dominates by understanding that most humans are readable long before they are resilient. Now the second layer. Silent villains do not just intimidate individuals. They reorganize groups. One person becomes nervous, then another becomes silent to avoid drawing attention. Then the entire group falls into a hierarchy defined by fear rather than status. This is why their presence feels historical, almost political. They do not enter a scene like a person. They enter like a regime. Look at how often they command rooms without raising their volume. A corridor empties. Conversation dies at a table. Allies wait for permission to speak, and enemies begin calculating exits. That is not supernatural power. It is social engineering through sensory restraint. A loud tyrant can be resisted because he gives the crowd something clear to hate. A silent tyrant is harder to fight because he creates an atmosphere in which everyone starts managing themselves. The room obeys because humans are hierarchical animals. We look for the center of pressure and unconsciously adjust our place around it. The silent villain becomes that center not by asserting himself overtly, but by refusing to react in predictable ways. That refusal destabilizes everyone else. If he is calm, then panic looks foolish. If he is bored, then resistance looks amateur. If he smiles without warmth, then the smile itself becomes a warning. And there is a darker truth in anime than most fans admit. These villains often win the first battle before the plot even understands what happened. They don't defeat a room by overpowering it. They defeat it by convincing everyone inside that resistance will cost more than obedience. Once that belief settles in, the room has already surrendered. Not in blood, in posture, in breath, in hesitation. That is how obedience is born, not from chains, but from self-editing. So why does this archetype hit so hard across audiences? Because it exposes a humiliation we all recognize. We like to imagine that courage is loud and that power announces itself in obvious ways. Anime tears that fantasy apart. The silent villain shows that real dominance often looks clean, composed, almost elegant, which means the scariest person is not the one who rages at the door. It is the one who walks in, says nothing, and watches everyone else lower their eyes. The final reason these scenes stay in your mind is that they weaponize restraint. A restrained predator feels more intelligent than a violent one. He seems to have moved past the need for proof. He does not need to prove he is dangerous because the room is already proving it for him. That is the masterstroke. He has made other people become his interpreters, his heralds, his evidence. And that is why the 7-second freeze works. 7 seconds is enough time for the human nervous system to collapse into story making. In 7 seconds, people invent rank, intent, consequence, and failure. In 7 seconds, a room can go from noisy to obedient. Silent anime villains understand this instinctively. They do not demand fear. They manufacture it by leaving a vacuum and letting the mind fill it with its own execution. So the next time a character says nothing and everyone else starts sweating, remember what you are really seeing, not quiet but control, not emptiness but occupation, not peace but a predator measuring the room before it eats the confidence out of it. The silent villain archetype is not just entertainment. It is a warning about how humans surrender authority to calm, to composure, and to the person who seems least reachable. If you want to go deeper into these tactics and learn the psychology behind room control, authority framing, and predatory stillness, then to master these tactics in real life, get the Silent Observer's Playbook, or check out the recommended reading in the description below. Like, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Subscribe for more.